Hello and welcome to 52 Weeks. This week we're still in Chapter 4, and we're actually in Section 4, which is focused on streetscapes. I've broken all these things down into 6 segments because it's very much easier to digest in pieces because there's so much that's here that needs to be discussed. So we look at boulevards and parkways, designs for signature streets. Our city as a park working group that was recommended institutionalized in the Capital Corridor Plan developed back in the 1990s. You hear that? The 1990s, where a system of major boulevards and parkways are identified to receive focus and special treatment for trees, other greenway, artwork, and redeveloped neighborhoods. All right, it is 2019, so that was in the 1990s. We need to be dusting that off and taking all that work that was done and retrofitting it into what we have now. I'm sure the planning, this is what's interesting with planning, if the ideas were done in a really good way and understanding in an equitable way, this plan should be able to be knitted right into the comprehensive plan. And much of the comprehensive plan has dug into some of this because not a lot of people know about the history of planning through the city. It was in such a dysfunction, and in its behind its scene, the city planning was really nothing that was an active organization. It was reactive to things that were out there. So looking at boulevards and parkways, there's a diagram talking about this. Parkway is a broad landscape highway thoroughfare. When you look at developing these, this could be Front Street Parkway, Arsenal Boulevard, Sycamore Drive Parkway from 17th to Elmerton, Division Street over Greenbridge, Cameron Street at the Paxton Creek Basin. These boulevards can be happening at State Street, Market Street, Forster Street, McClay Street, Arsenal Boulevard Parkway, Cameron Street, Paxton Street, 2nd Street north of Forster, 6th and Hoffman Streets, Division West 7th Street. These are prime areas to look at these boulevards and parkways. Enhanced streets, these are areas that warrant careful design, where we take and build a Parkway Drive, the Derry Street and Mulberry Streets. This is occurring at Parkway Drive, Derry Street, Mulberry Streets, 13th Street, 17th Street, again, Sycamore Street to Sycamore Drive. They should be really well-crafted streets and look at the greening that's happening in them. When we're looking at planning these things, it's always helpful to look at precedent studies so we can look at something else that was done, and it may or may not translate well to somewhere else, but here's a really good side precedent, and this is in Wilmette, Illinois. It says the comp plan pulls this out now. It has 11 miles of brick road where residents favored brick. The cost is about $240,000 per city block. It brings about slower speeds, water permeable, and it is more noisy. That could be a benefit for hybrid or electric cars, that this gives some sound that pedestrians know that a hybrid car is coming. The Market Street Boulevard, this is a historic west to east street, or east to west, depending on which way you're traveling. Market Street provides a direct connection through the Hill District between Reservoir Park, City Island, and the Riverfront Park. So these are all knitting that together. It's a very important boulevard. So we can take a look at these images. The components of Market Street is also referenced back into the land use section as action 2.3.1.2, and those are some examples of what that looks like and how to revitalize that. State Street Boulevard, this is a formal, again, west to east street. State Street links the Riverfront Park to Reservoir Park via 2 important green spaces, the State Capitol Complex and the Harrisburg Cemetery. So here's an example. If you look at the before and after, the Harrisburg, the Veterans Memorial, or the obelisk, which is up near the William Penn High School building on Division and 3rd Street. And the idea is to bring this back down at State and 2nd Street as another marker that's on our city, and have this idea of the space traveling past into the other side of the river or over into some of the islands that you can see. Forster Street is very difficult because it's an automobile versus pedestrian street. Forster Street has widened to accommodate 4 lanes of traffic, parking lanes, and a median. As a result, the downtown and midtown neighborhoods were separated by a busy 125 wide arterial street. So think about that. That's how wide we've cut the city in half between downtown and midtown uptown. So it's very hard for pedestrians to cross in an easy fashion. Again, this is a design. If it was designed differently for pedestrians, it would be designed differently, and there would be a total connection between the 2 parts of the neighborhood, the Midtown area, or essentially Midtown, old Midtown, and then the new Midtown that's anything north of Forster. That's a whole argument that I'm not going to get into right now. You guys can feel free to talk about that in the comments. There's an interesting diagram here of what happens with crossing Forster Street at 6th. 6th was actually diverted and changed based on the Capitol complex. So prioritize redesign of the sidewalks and median, remove the parallel parking, create wider sidewalks connecting to the river, and again, use bollard lighting for the roadway surface. Think about Forster at the very end, the larger street tree area designed as bioswales to treat the stormwater runoff, provide an area of refuge for crossing pedestrians, and also infiltration areas so the trees can grow. And we have additional crossings at Capitol Street. 6th and 7th Streets, this is objective 4.12.2, is this northwest pedestrian boulevard. 6th Street should evolve as the city's most attractive north-south street. Due to its immediate proximity to residential neighborhoods, this has a potential for this new commercial area between Forster and Maclay to be programmed as a lifestyle retail associate with development of the city's premier commercial space. This is where the new federal courthouse is going and the state archives building happening in there. There's this green diagram of what happens if you create a green space from the school, Ben Franklin School, in front of the housing towers, right up into there, and kind of just continue to do this boulevard up through 6th Street to Maclay. And this is a really big connection back to things we talked about before in moving the central business district, which is downtown, as a landlocked, thinking of it as a landlocked element, and then moving it into the 6th Street and that proximity. So growing this area, so we're focusing more on larger floor plans for Class A buildings and Class A offices, and that can sit on the back of North 7th Street. It's really nice because this transition from the river, we've got a scaling of all these historic neighborhoods to rising up and getting more and more towers near, right backing up against the railroad along 7th Street as a connecting piece. So we look at this north-south boulevard. They need to have appropriate streetscape treatment. The parking master plan for the city, including the planning of 7th Street garages serving 6th Street development. Look at farm show peak requirements and remote downtown parking. So we should always consider the adjacencies that we could connect with and actually encourage people to park in other garages and walk that distance. That would be good to disperse some of the movement and create some more foot traffic around this area of 6th Street. Again, 6th and 7th Street, we can look at the traffic circle at 7th and Forster. There could be green walls in the 7th Street garage to minimize its visual dominance. The transit right away connecting points north. So we're looking at this focus at a transit connection that's been talked about from the Harrisburg Transportation Center up north. 2nd and Front Streets, the decoupling of these two streets was, we need to think about this as there was one in and one out. That's kind of they work as a couple. 2nd Street and Front Street are prime examples of streets whose time has come to return to original design intentions as a local distribution street and parkway, respectively. So the parkway would be Front Street and the local distribution is 2nd Street. The ideas on this is that this decoupling happens, that both of the streets should be returned to a two-way traffic flow, initially north of Forster Street and later throughout the entire city after the transit options increase. So, we get to the change over this to more of a local streets. And that also has to be done with some rethinking of our transportation. That goes into the mobility chapter. Maclay Street Boulevard, objective 4.12.3, refashion Maclay Street as a park-like streetscape, providing unique identity as the city's centrally located east-west corridor, establish an inner loop with the city's larger greenbelt. So this makes sense for this passageway of greening Arsenal Boulevard and Maclay connecting back to Reservoir. Maclay Street should be looking at a new bridge type. That's a multimodal bridge. The bridge should be reconsidered as a design feature as you enter into the city or exit out of the city. So Alameda Bridge in Valencia, Spain is looking at this as an example that was pulled out in the comp plan. Generous pedestrian walkway is separated from the roadway by the bridge structure at grade level, creating much greater comfort and safety for pedestrians than the standard narrow sidewalk directly adjacent to the roadway. So look at this as a way to imagine wandering through here either walking or by bike. And people do use that bridge quite a bit when they're going across. The problem is people don't like to use it because it's dangerous. I mean, you fall out into off the curb or accidentally ride off on the curb, you are subject to high-speed vehicles. So that's the problem. It's a design issue. If we put our priorities first as actually making great places placemaking and great public realm, and consider our humans to be our greatest resource instead of our vehicles that weigh tons, and focus on that as driving everywhere we got to get to quickly and in our little private zones. We can begin to change the landscape, and also I think provide some change in mental health as well when we have a place that we really take a pride in and understand and enjoy, instead of just something that we're getting from point A to point B. Division Street Boulevard, Gold 4.13, East-West Green movement. Again, looking at this bridge that was talked about before, we're connecting these two. This is a proposal, when you're looking at this diagram, that's linking Wildwood Park. The campus is the Italian Lake. We've got William Penn, but going the whole way from the roundabout off of Front Street, the whole way through over the railroad tracks, past the 7th Street Plaza, and then into another potential roundabout in the off of Elmerton, and looking at Arsenal Boulevard as well, connecting those two. Division Street Boulevard also looks at the Uptown Plaza redesign, provide an attractive terminus to 7th Street, engage retail directly with Division Street. We provide and strengthen community commercial core, provide a unique regional destination retail. We've got that because of the connection off of 81 and also Cameron Street and 322. Provide a greenway connection linking the riverfront and Wildwood Park, and also having a plan for circulation of how do we move about that space. So that's something to be thinking about. This is what a comprehensive plan does. It looks and zooms back out to larger networks. What if we made that as a space that was a great green space that became a traffic way for pedestrians and bicycles and also vehicles, so it's multimodal. That could be a nice connection point to help connect the residents that are outside in that part of the city and out of that Susquehanna Township.